Windows Server 2016 is already out. So let's start building our own lab environment with the new features that Windows 2016 has to offer. Hello friends, this is Nick from NLB Solutions, and today I'm going to do something different. In the past, you all know that my channel was created about a year ago, and when I started creating the videos, I've tried to add new things to the videos, of course, and if something new is out, I try to add this into the mix so that the channel can be both helpful and in troubleshooting and new versions of software to introduce new features that were provided by Microsoft. So what I'll do is I'm going to start creating a video series on the topic of Windows 2016. Because you all know that 2 days ago Microsoft officially released the final version of the product, and you can see right here I have it already installed on one of my virtual lab machines. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by creating a brand new lab from scratch, and I'm going to use 2016. So I'm going to be presenting some new stuff that is included in the new version. Of course, I'm going to learn a lot, and I hope that you're going to learn as well. So let's start with the first video of the series, which is going to be on how to install and do some additional and initial configuration of your Windows server. So before starting to actually install the Windows, I just want to go through the minimal system requirements that Microsoft provided, and I think this is a good thing for you to look at before you go ahead and install the operating system in general. So for the processor, they require a minimum of 1.4 gigahertz 64-bit processor, which of course nowadays most of the processors are 64-bit compatible, and it should be just fine if you plan to do this in a lab environment, or if you plan to install the server on a physical machine if you want. On the RAM side, they've said that a minimum of 512 megabytes is required, but this is only for the core edition of the server. If you want the server with desktop experience installation, you need a minimum of 2 gigabytes of RAM. So the next one is the storage, and they say that the absolute minimum to install the operating system is 32 gigabytes. But you need to bear in mind that if you have more than, for example, 4 or 2 gigabytes of RAM, the page file that is going to be created is going to take space as well. So this is a good consideration for you to have. Of course, the other requirements are really basic. You need to have an Ethernet adapter capable of at least a gigabit throughput, and you need to have a DVD, or you can install the operating system through a USB if you require. A minimum of resolution that they give is 124 to 768 or higher, and this is of course the minimum. And keyboard and mouse, which is we all know that this is a requirement that we all need to have in order for us to install a server. So I already have booted into the installation media of my Windows server, and basically the installation is pretty much the same as the other operating systems that you have seen in the past. So in the first screen you will have the option to select a language. In my case, I'm going to stick with the US English, and the keyboard input method is going to be US. So I'm going to click next. And you have the option to install now or repair. I'm going to choose install now because this is a brand new installation of the product. So we need to wait for the setup to load, and in here you have the options for you to select. So with this evaluation that I've downloaded from the TechNet evaluation, I have the standard and the data center editions of the Windows Server 2016, and of course I have the only core versions and desktop experience versions. So for this video, I'm going to go ahead and install the desktop experience standard evaluation, because I think this is the general one. Of course, in the future I'm going to create a core version of the product, so we can see how this is done as well. And of course, depending on your environment and your requirements, you may need to have the core version only because you think it's going to be more stable, as Microsoft recommends. If you want stability, go ahead and install the core version, or if you want, you can go with the desktop experience, where you have all the GUIs available, and you can with 2 clicks of the mouse you can configure things as usual. So I'm going to click next, and I'm going to accept the license terms. If you want, you can go ahead and read them. I think they are the general license terms, but if something new has been added, maybe it's interesting for you or your company to read these before you install the product. So I'm going to click next, and the next window is the usual one if I want to upgrade my Windows or if I want to custom install. And as this is a brand new machine, it's currently not partitioned at all, I've presented a 60 gigabyte disk for me to install the product. So what I'm going to do, of course I can click next, and it's going to basically create the all the partitions. It's going to create the system reserved space for the master boot record and so on, but in this case I'm going to click new, and I'm going to use all the space, and it's going to warn me that it's going to need this system reserved space, and in most cases it's around 500 megabytes. There it is. So my partition 1 is system reserved, and my partition 2 is the space that is going to be used for the operating system to be installed. So I'm going to click next, and from here we all know this is the basic installation of a normal Windows server, or a it's pretty much the same as a desktop as well. So I'm going to pause the video right here, and I'm going to wait for the installation to finish, and I'm going to resume so we can see what is the next step in the configuration that we need to do. So after the installation is finished, I'm going to click restart now, and I'm going to wait for my virtual machine to boot up once again. And there you go, the Windows Server 2016 is booting up. It looks the same as the Windows 10 operating system boot screen in general, and we all know that from the past most of the server operating systems are, well, let's say not really well configured when they are first released. So I'm really hoping this one is going to change something with it, with this thinking. Because if I remember correctly, the Windows 2008 version and 2012 were not as good as the R2 versions. So we'll see how it goes in the future, and how are things going to behave. So after configuring the devices, it did another restart, and I'm waiting for the initial account screen to appear for me to add a password for my admin account. So let's see. So there it is. I'm going to set a password for my administrator account, and now I have the login screen, which is pretty much the same login screen as the yes, of course, it looks the same as Windows 10. So I'm going to press Ctrl Alt and Delete, and I'm going to log in as administrator for the first time. Okay, so it's going to create my profile, and I'm going to be able to see the normal login screen, which of course includes additional features for the Windows server. So pretty much this is how you can install the Windows 2016 server from scratch, and it's a really fast process. It's easily done, easily achieved. So the next thing that I want to show you is how to configure some initial settings that I configure when I install a brand new server. So I went ahead and fixed the resolution because I know that most of you guys are really annoyed when the resolution is not that good, but please note that in a lab environment I need to or it's not possible for me to have a better resolution so I can show you the installation process. But as soon as the operating system starts up and everything is okay, I always try to fix that so it can be better for the viewers. So the first thing that I want to and I have to do is configure the local server that I've installed. So what I do is I open the server manager, and basically it pops up when you start the operating system and you log in, and I go to the local server, and in there it's really good to have all the features, all the things that I want to configure on this server into one place. And I start from the bottom, or from the top to the bottom, and configure them one by one. For example, I start with changing the computer name. So I want to change the computer name. So this is a generic one. I'm going to change it to NLB-DC-01 because this computer is going to be my first domain controller that I'm going to promote in my environment. So this is going to be configured in a future series. I'm going to close this window and I'm going to click restart later because it will need to restart in order for the name change to take effect. The next thing, it's always good to check the firewall, but this is a thing that needs to be checked after the domain controller is promoted. It's always good to check and verify that your private networks and guest or public networks, the firewall is on and working. And for your domain firewall, I always try to turn it off because I don't want any communication to be blocked. Because I know that Microsoft are trying to and basically are saying that the domain network's firewall should not block anything, but I just want to be sure. So what I do is when I promote a domain controller or when I have a member server, I try to disable this in order for me to as a precautionary method of troubleshooting, let's say. So the next thing is the remote management and remote desktop. You can see that my remote desktop is already enabled. From here you can enable remote desktop, so you'll be able to connect to the server via RDP. And this option is set to do not allow remote connection to this computer by default, but I click it to allow and only secure using the network level authentication. In here you can add additional users that will be able to make a remote desktop to this server, but the administrator account, which is the local admin, already has access. So the next thing that I usually configure is, because you want your server to be where you want it to be and to be static, what I usually do is I change the DHCP IP address to a static one, because you all know that if you use a DHCP assigned address, your resources that you are going to use on the server can be, well, in different places, let's say that way. Because today the DHCP can give an IP address of 192.168.1.1. Tomorrow it can, that address will not be available and it will give a different address. Of course you can make a reservation for the server, but it's always a good thing to have a server with a static IP address. You can achieve this by opening the properties of the Ethernet card, going to the Internet Protocol version 4, and select the radio button, use the following IP address and add the information in here. So as I've already configured this, the next thing that I go through is the updates. Of course, you can configure the updates to different options, let's say. So if you want your server to install updates automatically, of course you can always select this option, or if you have any restart options, you can configure them in here. If you want your server to install only selected updates, it's always a good idea to change the settings so that the server will only check for updates and not install them. In here I'm not able to see that. It's going to check for updates nevertheless, but I'm pretty sure that if I install WSUS and I control the updates from there, it will not go ahead and install them where I don't want. So the next thing is the Windows Defender. Currently the protection is on, which is good. Of course, you can always check the Windows Defender and do some additional configurations. I hope that the Windows Defender will not block any packets that it detects as malware, because this can be really troublesome if you have, for example, a third-party application and your Windows Defender starts acting strangely, blocking connections to the application, and you end up with a lot of complaints from your customers. The next one is the feedback and diagnostics. You can configure them from here, and of course you can configure the time. But if you connect to the internet, of course it will try to check for the time from the internet, and it will configure all the settings. But from here you can change the time zone to the time zone that you're currently located in. So I'm going to change mine. Okay, and I'm going to click OK to this. And of course this is the last step, but it's really important one. You have the product ID, and in here you can set the product ID for the operating system. What I usually do is I activate the product when the server is fully operational, because I don't want to activate a product that I'm not really sure that is going to work fine, because as you know, not all of the installations can go how we like them to go, and in the end you can be left with an activation of Windows Server that you're going to decommission. So this is how you do the basic configuration, the initial configuration of a Windows server. At least these are my steps that I do. The only thing that is left for me to do is just restart the server so it can pick up the new name. And let's do this and end up the video. So after the restart, my server is booting up once again. It's going to load the server manager, and I'm just going to confirm that under the local server I have the new name that I desire. So I'm just waiting for it to load up, and there it is, the NLB-DC-01. So this, friends, is how you install the new server 2016. I might say that there is nothing new for you to be afraid of. The installation process from scratch is pretty simple, it's pretty fast and elegant. So in the next video of the series, I'm going to continue with promoting this server to my first domain controller, so we can see how the process has changed from 2012 to 2016. If you have any comments, you can always put them in the comment section below. If you have any problems, you can always ask the questions and I will try to answer them as soon as possible. And if you like the video, of course you can subscribe to the channel. I'm going to release new videos from the 2016 series starting from today. So there are a lot of interesting things that we are going to go through this long road of installing and configuring the Windows 2016. Once again, this was Nick from NLB Solutions. Thank you very much for viewing, and see you soon.